Oh, don't worry, my next video is going to be about MGTOW. This is more or less a video directed towards what is hardcore versus softcore. And I'm going to make this video first before I start production on the next MGTOW video I'm making. But what is hardcore versus softcore? Now, if you don't know, whenever you post something on the internet, it's going to be criticized no matter what, regardless of what the content is. Someone out there is going to disagree with it and is going to respond to you in some fashion or way. And, and ultimately, it leads to a back and forth sort of motion of talking to each other. To me, I find that to be a form of criticism, and it's effective and constructive. However, a lot of people don't understand on what is hardcore versus softcore. Hardcore is when you're all out and you're direct, and you basically are not afraid of being direct with what your message is, and you're certainly not afraid of calling out all the bullshit of that individual and calling out the logical fallacies, and you get what I mean. Basically being harsh to a degree. And it can be useful in terms of getting that person to listen, actually. And also it helps with actually grinding down the points of why is this individual personally just wrong on every level. Then softcore is basically where you are criticizing that person, but you're not doing it so harsh to that extent. You're basically only critiquing that individual on some points instead of everything on those points, and or just giving that person some advice, and or simply put, just responding to one tiny bit of the video and ignoring the rest. That to me is softcore. And for the most part, I always stuck with the hardcore, especially when I'm responding to MGTOWs and certainly crazies, and or the intellectually weak-minded MGTOWs that don't formulate arguments pretty well, like the grandpa MGTOW I made. If you don't know what that is, I'll leave links to the description. But aside from that guy, he was intellectually weak. But aside from that sort of thing, softcore, that's what it basically is. It's being more gentle when it comes to using your hammer of criticism while responding to that person. And I've always stuck with the hardcore methods because the way I see it, I tend to respond to a lot of people that don't listen to people that, if you're trying to be soft or trying to ask politely, some of those people won't listen to you if you're like that. The only way you can get their attention or their fans' attention is if you're pretty harsh to a degree. And it has its ups and downs. Like, if you're pretty harsh, yeah, to some individuals, it will turn off their rationality brain, and it will turn on this emotional side where they stop listening and they start becoming emotional and they start getting angry and all that. That's the downside of being hardcore. But the upside is you have a far more degree of actually convincing that person if they're wrong on this particular subject. Especially when they become salty, you prove them wrong again, then they realize that they're wrong, and that's usually how it works, the way I see it, at least. However, for the ups and downs for softcore is very different. Being softcore, that tends to, or the ups and downs of being softcore is that, if you're trying to criticize this person because they have this one tiny little problem and the rest of it is good, then the upside is that you can avoid being kind of a jerk sometimes unnecessarily, certainly. And that helps maintain your friendship with that individual if you are friends. However, the downside of being softcore is that it kind of robs the potential for that individual to learn and grow, and it keeps them ignorant if they are totally wrong with everything. So that's a bit of a danger of being softcore sometimes. Like, for example, let's say you had a friend named Rob, for example, and he was a crazy feminist who believed that all men should be exterminated and all that, and you only critiqued him on one tiny part of the video. I mean, that's being softcore, and that's not helpful because you're kind of robbing that individual from his potentiality that his mind could be totally changed 100%. And the potential problem, or what's the problem, the harm of that is also, if you don't criticize them on every single facet, it leads to that individual being closed-minded later down the road when he continues making more videos without being challenged fully. However, with the analogy of a hardcore, the potential danger of doing that if you're doing it over too much is, as I said before, if you're too harsh on it, it can lead to some people it turns off their rationality mind, and it makes them more emotional because they hate being criticized, and especially it doesn't help when it comes from a person that's being pretty harsh on their personal beliefs. Now, for the most part, I don't particularly care about feelings, but the only time I do care about feelings is if it's an individual I know of that I've had good conversations with and or is reasonable. That's the only time I do care about feelings. But beyond that, it's pointless to me. I really don't care that much about feelings. And personally, the way I see it, I'm much more suited to being that jerk kind of guy. If I see someone being totally wrong on their points, and it suits me better. Now, I don't want to cover too much about my past, but in one time I did start out as a softcore. Literally, like someone softcored me out of my belief in some aspects, and I'm not saying it's impossible that you can't be reasoned out of anything nicely. It can happen. People like me actually do exist. However, over time, as I just went on the internet, I mean, the internet is a very harsh and cruel place sometimes, and softcores don't last that long. So I've gone through a gradual evolution from being softcore to hardcore, and there's totally nothing wrong with that, really. And again, I like to stress that there is a time and place to be hard or soft. It's totally up to you. Like, you get to decide on if you're going to be hard or soft, but you have to be aware of the pros and cons of it. And for the most part, I just choose to be hardcore on most responses, and that's why I am pretty harsh on the crazy radical MGTOWs like Angry MGTOW and Traversable and Red Pill Ghost. Because those are the people I see that the only way you can actually get them to listen to you is if you are kind of a jerk to them in a sense. Like, being nice to them isn't going to get you any favors. And it certainly isn't going to get you any attention from them. But anyways, I'm Forbidden Thinker, signing out, and have a lovely day, and keep out for my next MGTOW video. Hopefully that'll come out pretty soon. And take care.